And we're live.
Aloha Snack Bar, everyone. It's the one, the only Senor Silverback coming to you live with the master of the flux capacitor, CJ. And we are joined with none other than the frosty Russian who has joined us today this morning. Because guess what? We're not having hanging with Harley today. We're going to be doing Harley tomorrow.
From the taiga of Siberia
Yes,
to the
yes,
fishing grounds of Primorsky Krai near
yes.
Japan to the Karelian Banya comes
Korean pie.
James, the Russian analyst.
That's it.
He breaks through the fog of geopolitical and Russia-related disinfo. Know the truth. See the players. Understand. I forgot the other part. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, that was like my old theme song, man. I gotta get that back. I love that thing. That thing was dope.
You got to find that Brit who did the voice recording for you.
Yeah, that was
He did
JP,
a
man.
phenomenal
JP's out in
job.
Scotland. He's amazing. He did that like on the spot, and Ken Keeling set that one up. I mean, he called up JP in Scotland. JP just did a guitar riff, did a voiceover. I was like, holy crap, my dude! He put the whole thing together in like 10 minutes.
Okay,
Unreal.
well now that I interjected, got you off your roll.
Yeah. All right, let me just go
Yes.
into the announcements real quick. Yeah, you can follow us on Twitter at the Rogue Money. Check us out on Facebook, Rogue Money, as well as the newly revamped RogueMoney.net. With that being said, also check out our sponsors. If you are suffering from debt, you're running and hiding because you're in fear for your life because creditors are threatening to ransom you and ransom your children until you pay this bill, then you need to contact myfreedomnow.us, myfreedomnow.us. Get the credit score you deserve. Kick the bankers in the nuts. With that being said, guys, well, TJ and James, what's crack-a-lackin'?
CJ.
Busy, lots of news, so many things going on at the same time. It's hard keeping track of all the information.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for our wonderful contributors that keep us posted on some of the most recent events. So, James, I yield the floor to you, sir.
Alrighty. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is I, the Russian analyst, this morning. Thank you to CJ and V for bringing me on. I on short notice today. Just wanted to jump in to discuss the basically. I mean, the ongoing big story is this soft coup attempt, cookie crumbling in D.C. with the revelations from House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes of California that, in fact, the National Security Agency did collect intelligence data on aides to Mr. Trump, if not the man himself, in a White House press conference, which put the Democrats, particularly Representative Adam Schiff, the Schiff of Burbank, California, home of NBC and all the various media conglomerates, on their heels in terms of sputtering rage. Why is that? Well, because as I stated on this program the last time I was on, the Trump haters have tried to have it both ways. They've tried to create what I called the Schrodinger's warrant, where they said the FISA warrant existed back in November, first reported by Louise Mensch of Heat Street and the UK Guardian and the BBC, I should add, Her Majesty's government-funded teletext channel. For those of you who aren't in the United Kingdom in our audience, or aren't London Paul, but they've tried to have it both ways. All that was reported, the New York Times headline said, used the word wiretap, referred to it several times, used the phrase wiretapping in the articles. And then they, when Mr. Trump on March 4th dropped his Twitter bombs on them, accusing Barack Hussein Obama of ordering his phones at Trump Tower and elsewhere to be tapped, suddenly the term wiretapping was, either completely bonkers and irrelevant, or they attacked a straw man that, Obama personally hand-signed an order, to his minions, having some minion go to Trump Tower and, jack with some wires in the basement. Now, of course, that's not how modern electronic surveillance works. For anybody who knows anything about the technology that's developed of the last, well, it hasn't worked that way at least for 30 years. So what came out from Nunes was the fact that there was collection. It appears to have been legal according to Nunes, but it was of the incidental variety. However, it refocuses the issue on what congressional Republicans constantly asked FBI Director James Comey and NSA Director Admiral Rogers about on Monday, which was the issue of how Lieutenant General Flynn's identity, which was supposed to be protected as a U.S. person engaging in a legitimate phone call with a target of legitimate foreign surveillance, was nonetheless had his name disclosed and dragged through the mud. And so not only were the minimization procedures that we were all told about after Snowden's revelations of 2013 protect the identity of American citizens, of American green card holders and U.S. persons when they're talking to a legitimate target of foreign surveillance from their Fourth Amendment rights being violated. But all this information was leaked out illegally with, according as Representative Trey Gowdy of South Carolina, or maybe North Carolina, I think he's South Carolina, reminded people, carries a felony penalty of 5 years in prison.
No, 10 years, bro. 10 years.
10 years in federal prison for
Unreal.
violating the classification of said intercepts. And according to Admiral Rogers' testimony on Monday on Capitol Hill, there are only 20 people at the NSA with the authority to unmask the identity of a U.S. person whose communications with a foreign intelligence target are detected by the NSA. Only 20 people. So either one of those people at NSA did it, and of course nobody, I don't think any of the Congress critters actually asked Rogers point blank if it was you, or asked Comey point blank if it was you or someone on your staff. Although they generally denied it, any awareness of this, understandably so. So that's kind of the rundown of that state of play. However, there's a much bigger issue, which is not only that the establishment is doubling down and saying, well, this is entirely legitimate collection, and if Flynn hadn't been talking to the Russians, this wouldn't have happened. Of course, the question is, Michael McFaul, Barack Obama's former ambassador to Russia, communicated with members of the Russian government prior to his ambassadorship being confirmed, when he was still a private citizen officially and a Stanford academic.
Right.
And yet his identity was not disclosed. It wasn't leaked out, even though presumably the NSA recorded those calls as well. So what you have is not only a double standard and a gross violation of federal law by a runaway, out of control deep state, what you also have is that this so-called Section 702 collection, which they claim didn't require a FISA warrant because it involved a foreign person, was being used as a pretext, as a, I forget what the term is called, it's reverse something, but it's basically a technique where you deliberately target someone who's foreign, like Ambassador Kiselak, in order to, and other individuals abroad, in order to scoop up as many communications, quote unquote, incidentally from Americans as you possibly can, particularly from prominent Americans whose job is to communicate with Ambassador Kiselak, or at least to.
It was a dragnet, man.
Yeah,
Right,
it's basically a setup to scoop up as much as you can there. And then the other issue is you had Obama loosen the minimization requirements, which the Democrats didn't want to talk about in Monday's hearings before he leaves office. So that this whole point about, only 20 people at NSA can make that decision. Well, that's irrelevant. Even if none of them made it, let's say they're innocent. How many dozens, if not hundreds of people in the Obama administration within the Justice Department could have done it, or within the FBI?
Yeah.
James,
which
real
kind
quick.
of makes Comey's denials and all this disavows rather worthless.
Yeah, it does.
James, correct me if I'm wrong through this, and what people have to understand is that not only was there surveillance, it was actually completely unmasked, and the names were revealed of who in particular. And there's only certain individuals that are privileged to that type of information, of which would be none of the persons with the Obama administration. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be limited, and on this point, by the way, Comey was asked the question, who has that authorization, and he was intentionally vague. He was also intentionally vague and evasive in his answer with a question from a New York State Congresswoman, and her name escapes me at the moment, but she's a freshman, and this was reported by the conservative Treehouse blog, where Comey was asked point blank, when did you inform the Obama administration that you opened this investigation into alleged Russian meddling in the election? Now, so, Comey had said we started the investigation in July, but when it came time to actually state for the record, when he told the president of the United States that this investigation had opened, he just kind of went, well, due to the sensitivity and blah, blah, blah. We were, he basically dodged the question for 3 minutes. He ducked the question. And then he finally said, well, there wasn't a director of national intelligence at the time, meaning that, essentially, he tried to punt and say that he only informed Obama after the election, which is horse crap. I'm sorry, that's crap. You cannot have such a high-level investigation with such explosive political ramifications, the president of the United States not know about it. That is insulting to our intelligence and of any reasonable person. And Comey has finally put his cards on the table and revealed himself as the black hat, compromised hack that he is, particularly through his deputy, Andrew McCabe, whose wife accepted a very large contribution for her campaign in Virginia, the state of Virginia, from Terry McAuliffe, the longtime Clinton financier and crony.
Huh. And there's also ties between Comey and his brother who worked for the Clinton Foundation, is it not?
There are ties. Comey worked back, I think Comey was a favorite of, at one time, Senator Chuck Schumer in your state, B.
That's right, Chucky
That's
Cheese.
who Chucky Schumer was, the one who was advancing his career along with Preet Bharara. And unfortunately, that's why Bharara had to go as well.
Got it. Okay.
The Schumer connection.
Got it. That makes sense now. That makes sense. Wow. Unreal. Huh.
And Conservative Treehouse has been an excellent source in this. And the biggest next shoe to drop is not only these abuses of the minimization procedures and spreading this information as far and wide in the administration as possible in order to maximize the political damage to Trump, but there's even bigger shoes waiting to drop, guys, with this whistleblower. CJ, you want to talk about that as far as completely illegal surveillance, warrantless surveillance, again being conducted, even though after 2006 and after the Snowden revelations, we were told, oh, that couldn't possibly happen.
Well, just to break down the timeline of it as well, looking back at that sign-off of Obama regarding the wider data sharing, the timing is not consistent. They knew about the wiretapping of Trump.
Of course they had to have known about the investigation. What would be the point of widening the distribution of such data if there were no investigation? And Obama didn't know nothing.
And I'm looking at the report right now that states that James Clapper signed off on the Clap signed off on the rules as early as December 15th. And then Loretta Lynch did on January 3rd. And then likewise, Obama signing off on it. So they knew this well in advance, and they were doing this just as political cover for themselves.
And Lynch has engaged in some, correct me if I'm wrong, squirrely behavior since she left the office. She recorded a video, which I posted in one of my articles in Rogue Money, talking about blood in the streets. And how we've got to oppose Trump even to the point of blood in the streets.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she openly went on.
So is that a person that you could trust to reliably and soberly handle classified information regarding Trump's aides that remains classified in part because it's so circumstantial, or the contact is legitimate, or there's just no there to declassify? There's nothing incriminating in the conversations.
No, I mean it's incredible these people are getting away with this. It's unreal, man.
I don't know if they're going to get away with it.
No, they're not going to.
They're trying to.
They're trying to.
And the media is trying, but the problem is they've twisted themselves in knots because they're trying to say, well, we've got all these experts, and 702 collection is not the same thing. It was all incidental. You don't need a FISA warrant for it. There was no FISA warrant. Well, how long is this wall of denial going to hold? I mean, Trump has the authority to declassify the existence of a FISA warrant on his own. He can do it. I think he's waiting to do it because he's giving these people more rope to hang themselves with, as I said on the last show, more time to simply deny, and pile up the denials. So there's no question in the mind of any moderately informed person, once he drops the hammer and declassifies that FISA warrant, that the New York Times, the Washington Post, the CNN, they all lied. They all were complicit in the lie.
Right. So, and what James alluded to earlier is regards to this whistleblower that for some reason, obvious reasons, he's being ignored. So basically what happened was there's this whistleblower, Dennis Montgomery, who basically when he left the CIA was left and NSA left with,
and he worked under John Brennan, but with Clapper as well.
So he left with 47 hard drives and over 600 millions of pages with classified information in regards to government surveillance of Americans.
And again, this is completely illegal. And there's no FISA warrant. There's no excuse that these people were talking to the Russians. There's no pretext for it.
And these are the things that Edward Snowden told us what was going on. And here we go. There's an actual whistleblower.
It's not entirely NSA. This is from CIA conducting domestic U.S. surveillance illegally, which is contrary to their charter.
This is unreal. And this is directly from the administration, the Obama administration. This is just completely absurd. These people need to be prosecuted.
And the organization that's putting it forward is Freedom Watch, which was started by Larry Klayman after he left Judicial Watch. But Judicial Watch has their own FOIAs and probe into their own private investigation into Loretta Lynch, demanding documents from her regarding her meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport last summer. The infamous "let's talk about our grandkids" meeting amidst basically trying to make sure the fix was in with Comey's investigation of the Hillary server.
V, thoughts?
Man. I know that's a lot of information for our audience to absorb, but I think we covered the waterfront between the three of us pretty well.
Yeah, I think I have nothing further to add to that. I think it's absolutely it's absolutely going to blow in their face.
And speaking of things that are blowing up in people's faces, or just after David Rockefeller died, I sent an email to W about the prediction he made on this program several weeks ago on the Friday night show when he was the guest, where he talked about how a lot of people who have been a part of this Rockefeller globalist agenda are basically going to start dropping. And of course, we saw David Rockefeller's death. According to V, he was brain dead many months ago, but his death was acknowledged with the coming of the spring equinox for whatever occultic reasons. And then you had now you have David Brock, who used to be in the 90s, a real sleazeball, who in the 1990s was this hired right-wing gun investigating the Clintons, who for some bizarre reason or due to his own homosexual-related politics switched sides and became a Clinton dirt, shoveling, gathering consigliere, and led Media Matters for America, the George Soros-funded organization that's been attacking
Media Matters.
The new media, attacking Alex Jones, everybody in the right, pushing the Russians story since last spring. I mean, pretty much since the beginning of when they started raising hell about it in March or April of 2016, when CrowdStrike first came out with their claims about Russian hacks of the DNC. And another interesting thing that's come out about that I saw yesterday was that Voice of America, the taxpayer-funded Broadcasting Board of Governors umbrella organization, reported that the Ukrainian government is denying one of the key findings of CrowdStrike, that the same Russian hackers that allegedly hacked the DNC also hacked an app that Ukrainian army officers installed on their iPads or droid devices or whatnot to direct artillery fire in the Donbass. Meaning that the claim was that the Russian military, the GRU, the group that was one of the bears, I don't remember if it was the Fancy Bear or the other bear, APT Bear, they got into the DNC server, basically hacked this app that the Ukrainian artillery officers were installing on their devices and using to direct artillery fire, which in turn led to these huge losses by the Ukrainian army of their howitzers to Russian directed, Donbass forces counter battery fire. Well, that's, the Ukrainians said that's a load of crap, and I think it is, because frankly, the Ukrainian army lost to their howitzers not because the Russians hacked their app, but because they're just not that good. They're not that well trained. And,
Correct.
when they were firing close to the border, particularly in late July and August of 2014, several shells landed in a Russian border town called Donetsk, not to be confused with the city of Donetsk that revolted against Kiev, but I'm talking about a little teeny border town called Donetsk. One shell landed on a house and killed a woman. And at that point, it appears that this was around the same time I first reached out to V and got in touch with him.
Yes.
And V was reporting that, hey, there's a counteroffensive coming. The Ukrainians are making advances. The Ukrainian military, backed by U.S. and NATO, that there's a Russian counteroffensive coming. And sure enough, the Russians opened up with artillery and grads and massive multiple rocket launcher systems with cluster munitions and wiped the Ukrainian 30th Brigade out. Just wiped them out along the border.
I think I was the only guy that reported on that at that time, bro.
Yeah, it was a highway of death, like in Iraq, and all the equipment was just left behind with just hundreds of bodies all over the place, and shell-shocked Ukrainian soldiers staggering into Russia seeking medical treatment and surrendering, and the media wouldn't report it. They wouldn't report the casualties. And I've written a story about this at Rogue Money. You guys,
and you were in Moscow when that happened, right?
I was in Moscow when that happened, because that was a few weeks after MH17, or like a week after it. I had to extend my stay in Moscow. I got sick at that time. But anyway, the point is,
were you meeting with Putin, James?
Yeah, I was meeting with Putin. That's right. But the point is, guys, the point is that CrowdStrike, I'm getting back to my point, because this is where people say I'm long-winded, but I'm trying to, I don't assume that the audience knows what I'm talking about, okay? I'm not talking about a topic that's something that happened up the street that you guys have already seen, or even a story like Nunes where, maybe some large share of the audience may already be following the basics. I'm talking about a story, something that happened 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, and what it has to do with a story today. The point is, CrowdStrike screwed up that story. They got it all wrong. And when you have the Ukrainians questioning what CrowdStrike puts out, it puts them in an awkward spot, because that also vindicates Jeffrey Carr, the cyber researcher who contributed to Glenn Greenwald at The Intercept, who's challenged CrowdStrike's narrative as phony and shoddy from the very beginning, the entire narrative. So if they screwed up and they were wrong about this hacker group, hacking this Ukrainian app for artillerists, then, how much more is CrowdStrike wrong about the entire thing? And here's the other, this just gets to the heart of the entire Russians hacked the election, quote unquote, narrative, because CrowdStrike, the FBI just took them at their word. There was no independent government forensic audit of the Democratic National Committee servers.
Right.
Comey had to admit that Monday under questioning, that they simply accepted CrowdStrike's findings, and that findings
face value without
another supposed cybersecurity firm whose CEO is buddies with the CrowdStrike CEO Dmitry Alperovich, who is on the board, or at least he's an advisor on cybersecurity to the Atlantic Council, which is a NATO think tank funded by foreign governments, the Norwegian government, the government of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and until very recently, Turkey, I may add. And, this is an organization that needs Russia as an adversary to justify its budget and existence.
Correct.
And Alperovich he has a conflict of interest. His wife worked for Obama's Department of Homeland Security, by the way. Another little connection there. The same Department of Homeland Security, I should add, that the state of Georgia, not the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, Georgia's Republican Secretary of State accused the DHS of hacking into his state's electoral database a few days after the election. And that was around the same time I wrote an article saying, will CrowdStrike claim that the Russians hacked the voting machines or the voting tallies? I published that article on election day. You guys can, people in the audience can go look that up. Assuming our archives are properly functioning, I think they will be. We'll have soon full functionality of them as we transition from Squarespace to WordPress over the next several weeks. But I wrote an article about the problems that Jeffrey Carr had with CrowdStrike and their reliability. And here you have Comey. Let me use an analogy that somebody else used in the comments section of a blog I read. Excellent analogy. Imagine that you have a murder case, and I'm probably sounding a little bit like Lionel here, because he's an attorney, and he goes on. He can be long-winded too, but I'll get to the point. Imagine a murder case where the feds say the mob killed the guy, but there's no autopsy done on the body. You take it from a private investigator's word that this is how the guy was killed. This is who we think did it, and the FBI just takes him at his word and goes from there. And there's no work done by FBI forensic investigators, none, not at the crime scene and not on the body. Would that be a valid professional investigation?
No, absolutely.
And how much more when you're talking about cybercrime and attributing it? I'm not denying that the DNC got hacked, but where I deny it is that they have a chain of custody to WikiLeaks. See, that's the entire problem. I mean, Julian Assange has been living in the Ecuadorian embassy for years. The Ecuadorian embassy is in the middle of London. It's very easy to tap, and it's very easy for Scotland Yard or MI5 to maintain 24-hour around-the-clock human surveillance of that place, not to mention GCHQ tapping the fiber optic cables into the place. I mean, screw the Vienna Conventions, of the early 60s. It's not like you think the British government cares about that. Of course, they've got Assange keystroke. Assange can't go to the toilet without the Brits knowing. And yet they cannot find his Russian government handler, or intelligence handler, even though, they say, well, WikiLeaks has been working with the Russians for years and now we're vindicated. No, you're not. Where's your proof?
Yeah. That
Assange is a Russian agent? And if he were a Russian agent, why don't you just indict him for espionage already? He's an Australian citizen.
Right.
Right? You can have the Australian government indict him for working with the Russians. Could you not?
Yes, absolutely.
So call the bluff. It's bullshit.
Right.
They've got nothing. They don't have the chain of custody. Comey was asked about it, and he said, well, we're working on trying to figure out who the intermediary was between the Russian, GRU or FSB hackers who hacked the DNC and Assange, which means they've got nothing. Because that intermediary doesn't exist is the simplest explanation. Because the former British ambassador to, I forget, Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, said it truthfully, that he saw disgruntled American Democrat insiders hand the data to WikiLeaks himself in the DC area, like Cloak and Dagger in some park somewhere in the Northern Virginia, DC area. So they've got nothing. They don't have it. They don't have a chain of custody. Even if the Russians did hack the DNC, they've got no proof that the dump came from the Russian government and not from disgruntled insiders who hated the fact that the DNC totally rigged it against Bernie Sanders.
Unreal. Unreal.
I can't explain it any more simply than that.
It's some serious Cloak and Dagger stuff, man, without a doubt. It's I'm loving the desperation. And and I believe this wholeheartedly, James. I believe this desperation is occurring at a time that this pedogate, man, where they're
that's the other that's the stuff. See, that's the stuff that could get people in the streets.
Yep.
This stuff, it's too hard. It's too difficult for the person on the street to grasp. And I think CJ has made this point on the show before. But when you start talking about members of the elite and children.
Yep. Everybody gets that.
Yeah.
Everybody gets that. I mean, just the other day, you had Dr. Phil, who took a lot of heat. Went out there and rolled out this young girl who was saying, I was on an island and, I was being held against my will. Since I was a child, I was sold into sex slavery. There's multiple elites that go hunt children on this island. They break bones of these kids. They kill these kids. There's more and more of this stuff is coming out. I mean, Sean from SGT Report does a phenomenal job detailing all of it. Dude, I'm like, this is the thing that I think this is the hammer, and that's why they are trying to stop Trump as much as possible.
And there's just even another shoe left to drop. There's so many shoes left to drop. is the thing that I've warned about on this show that is coming, is that the Pentagon's not going to be able to keep a lid on the leaks coming out of the E-ring about how much of course, believe me, they'll try to put a certain damper on it. Bill Gertz or somebody like that, or the Fox National Security correspondent, they'll say, well, this was all inadvertent. This was all signs of the CIA being incompetent, that tons and tons of arms shipped to the so-called moderate rebels from NATO, former Warsaw Pact NATO countries like Croatia or Bulgaria, ended up in these big dumps around Raqqa that the Marines or the Army Rangers captured. That was just a big CIA screw up. No, it wasn't a screw up. It was what Brennan wanted. They were deliberately sending these arms through cutouts to ISIS.
Yeah, just to take a real quick step back in regards to the pedophilia, and I meant to send this link out, but I did not. But Trey Gowdy is going to be heading up an investigation of the elite pedophilia rings.
Oh, wow.
And he has promised, he was providing testimony. He was almost brought to tears, just the fact that he was a prosecutor, in his home state, and talking about the images, some of the things that he has seen, and he's putting them on notice. He is putting them on notice. And he went on to state that basically anyone trying to obstruct this investigation, they will be publicly called out and asked to explain why they are attempting to do this. So Gowdy meant business. So this is getting ready to blow up.
Gowdy's got potential. I mean, I've been on the fence about him, and Conservative Treehouse is kind of bashed him a little bit, but I think he's got the potential. He didn't compromise himself during the Benghazi stuff the same way that some of the other people did, who just made sure it never went anywhere. I mean, once they pretty much denied that the CIA was sending massive quantities of arms to that so-called annex in Libya, the fix was in. I mean, everybody knew, okay, this is just denying Captain Obvious stuff and rebutting Rand Paul when he asked the question point blank to Hillary, and she just flat out lied or dodged it. I mean, at that point, it was over. But this is not going to go away, because there's too many rings and too many countries and too many people just fed up with it.
Yeah, so basically Gowdy went on to state that when he was talking to this detective about it, that quote unquote, I want you to give me a list of the providers that are giving you a hard time. We're going to have another hearing here. We're going to have them come and publicly explain why they are having a hard time complying with the law in child exploitation and child abuse cases. My guess is that they will be a very tough public explanation for them. So give me their names and the providers that you're having a hard time dealing with, and I might not be able to make them stop doing it, but I can make them come and explain why they're doing it. So he's basically stating that these detectives are having a hard time because these political figures are putting so much obstacles in their way of these investigations. But the good guys are fighting back. And
CJ, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to circle back to the illegal surveillance point we were making, not about the 702 FISA-less, pretext to surveillance. I'm talking about the totally illegal Fourth Amendment violating CIA and other agency domestic surveillance. Isn't Mr. Montgomery, or this whistleblower, if I've got his name correctly, isn't he contending from the documents that at least 126 federal judges, including members of the Supreme Court, were under surveillance?
That is correct, yes.
In terms of putting pressure, finding pressure points, probing for compromat, as the Russians call it, or dirt on these judges, so that they will rule in favor of both corporate and of course, criminal matters to protect members of the pedo elite.
Bingo. Yep, absolutely. Way to tie it all together.
Man.
It's unreal.
Ужасный, as the Russians say. Ужас. Horror is how it loosely translates.
It's absolutely ridiculous, man. Hey, what's going on with Tulsi Gabbard, my favorite woman in Congress?
Absolutely. Yeah, just again, she continues to do amazing things on the Hill, the things that she's advocating for. She was the
and this is the shout out to people in the comments who complain, oh, you're always bashing the quote unquote left, and you don't.
Are you kidding me? Heck no.
You don't give Dennis Kucinich and Tulsi Gabbard enough love.
Are you kidding me? How much more can I give, James? How much more can I give?
I don't know.
Yeah, so Tulsi Gabbard is actually pressing in Congress to federally decriminalize marijuana and to completely have it rescheduled. which just would be a huge move, just so, medicinally for the states
Get people off all these opioids.
Exactly, bingo.
They're destroying
so she's
people.
calling for it. Yeah, so her and Republican Representative Tom Garrett calling on Congress to update, and it's an outdated drug policy. The war on drugs won't work. It never did work, and this is a good move to help. In particular, families. There's so many families that end up, administering, cannabis to their kids, illegally. And you and I would do the same thing if it was helping our children, our families of a medical need. Why do they have to be, felons for doing this type of activity? So I completely applaud Tulsi Gabbard and her efforts of getting.
And also professional athletes, guys, there's been more revelations this off season, but people saying, just retired, this is the cocktail of painkillers they gave me. I can't even name all the painkillers I was given, and besides just the shots to perform, to be able to play on Sundays and not even just Thursday night football. And, the NFL needs to deal with its hypocrisy on marijuana. Big time, the whole system. As far as, these athletes are crashing into boards and walls and 330-pound men for our entertainment. I don't think we should begrudge them a joint to deal with the pain.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And what else is on the radar?
I got another story out of Russia that's a pretty big deal. That's interesting. To bring it back to, this is an economics focused program. The Russian central bank chairwoman Elvira Nabiulina, who is the favorite of the only central banker that maybe Jim Rickards likes, who's been a guest on this program. She announced that Russia is now fully prepared to operate its banks outside of the SWIFT system.
Yep.
That they are. We've heard a lot about it. There's been a lot of hype and discussion of it, but they finally got it operational in terms of the IT infrastructure. And on top of that, you have what's going on right now with Ukraine. The Ukrainian government is not only blockading the Donbass, where they've blocked all the coal traffic, the coal trains that were going back and forth with a lot of course, bribery to grease the skids for the army generals, the Ukrainian army generals, to allow that traffic to continue. But now that's all been shut off. Ukraine's power plants are running on coal fumes, the coal equivalent of fumes, the ones that aren't gas-fired or nuclear. It's good that the Ukrainians, about I think half of their base load is nuclear, but it's bad because the plants were built in the 1980s in the Soviet Union, and they're all, exceeding their service life. And Westinghouse wants to put their own rods in them instead of the Russian-made fuel rods, which is a very bad idea. And then on top of that, the Ukrainians can't afford to pay for the gas that they're re-importing from Slovakia in the western part of the country without subsidies from the European Union. But even setting aside that, if they manage to keep the lights on and avoid brownouts outside of Kiev and other poorer parts of the country, what you have is a situation where the Ukrainians are attacking Sberbank, Russia, which is, I think, the second or third largest bank by deposits in the country. Yeah. And of course, it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Sberbank in Moscow. And what's interesting, the irony of this situation is that, while Ukraine has claimed to be a victim of Russian aggression and been at war with Russia and all this stuff, Poroshenko's been running his chocolate factory in, I think it was Lipetsk, until he shut it down or sold it. He's been running his chocolate plants in the enemy aggressor nation that's invading Ukraine, quote unquote. So, he clearly doesn't believe his own rhetoric, or he would have stopped trading with the enemy. But number two, they're now attacking Sberbank, and this, of course, goes back to the oligarchs, because Ihor Kolomoisky, the oligarch turned warlord of Donetsk-Petrovsk, or Dnepr, I forget what they call it now. They've renamed it. Anyway, that's its Soviet-era name of the city on the Dnepr in eastern Ukraine, east-central Ukraine. His Privat bank is bankrupt. It's bankrupt like many of the Ukrainian oligarchs' enterprises are. So, of course, what he's trying to do, he's scheming to take over Sberbank's assets and basically get all the depositors' money, because his own bank has none. And of course, if it weren't for the fact that they've already severely restricted capital outflows, you can't get very much money out of your bank at a time. I don't know what they limit the withdrawals to, $500 equivalent a week or something like that. there would have already been massive bank runs in Ukraine, and the banking system would have collapsed. But under IMF tutelage, they're now cannibalizing the Russian-owned bank deposits in the country, which of course is going to destroy the loans. It's going to further, wreck the economy in terms of lending and small business.
Dude, that's going to be great. And also the fact that Russia's going to be paying off their Cold War bill, man. Isn't that great?
Yeah, they paid off all the Soviet era debt. There are still. I wanted to correct the record. They do still have a very small amount of federal Russian Federation debt, but I think they did some borrowing. I think it was the last couple of years in the capital markets. So they restarted last year tentatively. They did a debt float. I think it was like 3 to 5 billion euros or something like that. I don't know if they did it through the Chinese banks or how they got around the sanctions, but or maybe they did it in Dubai. But it was some very limited float. But overall, the Russian Federation's total debt, government federal debt, if you throw in maybe the oblasts, the regions themselves of Russia, it's probably still a figure less than $100 billion. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the trillions the insolvent seven own and have. And of course, Russia's gold reserves are already worth, I think they're fast approaching about $250 billion in value, especially as the gold price rises.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that is if we believe their official numbers, which I don't. I believe they have a lot more.
Yeah. Plus, of course, the reserves in the ground. And, I was trying to do some research the other day regarding strategic minerals, not only Russia's reserves in rare earths up north in the Kola Peninsula area, which was the old, Cold War playground where all the subs played the cat and mouse games, where the Northern Banner Fleet was based, but also the what is that, HO that Deb Bankster-Slater wrote an article about?
Yeah. HO, Holium.
Yeah, I was looking for that. I was trying to figure out, because it's primarily BRICS countries, and I think Australia that's got the biggest reserves. India, Australia, maybe South Africa or Brazil. No, Brazil and India have the biggest proven reserves of this holmium, which is it's basically it's the computer. It's the material they use to make the computer chip for the Terminators in the sky. The Terminator movies.
Oh,
in terms of the revolutionary processor or data storage, like if you read the whole backstory from that movie, and I think they talked about it a little bit in the Fox series. Okay, I'm getting off into a sci-fi nerd tangent, but basically it's a material that will allow a revolutionary leap in data storage capacity. So nice. It's going to be obviously one of the most valuable rare earths going forward in the next few years or decades.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Which brings us to the next thing, CJ.
Yeah, so V, you shared an article regarding gold price. Target still at 10,000 an ounce. You want to break that down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things is this. James has mentioned, Russia's gold reserves. Okay,
which are only exceeded by China's at this point. I mean,
exactly. And China, I'm telling you right now, is anywhere between 20 to 30,000 metric tons. They're not showing you exactly what they're holding in their wholly owned sovereign funds, their various different brokerages that they themselves control. And there's a great article by Bob Kirtley over at goldseek.com. I suggest you guys take a look at it. Gold price target unchanged at 10,000 an ounce. And that target was a target that a lot of people have set going back to 2005, 2006. Okay. Now, that's almost 10 years ago. All right, so in the 10 years, the same parameters have not changed. The same pressures on the gold market has not changed. When you look at it, okay, you still have, in the midst of all this entire paper-inflated world, this cancerous paper financial instruments that have flooded the world, that has distorted markets, that has made mark-to-market absolutely impossible, that has created destruction of any sort of capital formation, you name it, this has to be purged. So what we're seeing in the world is not only the death of globalization, but all the tremors, all the birth pangs, all the strain that we're seeing geopolitically and geoeconomically has to do with one thing and one thing alone, which is the coming birth of a new financial world order, a financial world order that is not based on vertical integration with one or a handful of countries dominating the whole entire system, but a global cooperative of mutually beneficial trade, honest and open policies, and commerce that benefits the populations of the nations that are involved. This is the greatest thing that the Western banksters have been terrified of, because their lifeblood, their life force that allowed them to go forth and do all sorts of exploitation is about to get cut short. So this birth of a gold standard and a gold trade settlement note is the coming reality. That is why Russia continues to buy gold. That is why Russia can confidently say, yeah, go ahead and keep those sanctions against us in place, please, by all means. Because as time and as the days are falling off the calendar, the more inoculated they are against any sort of Western manipulation, because they're holding hard assets, number one. And number two, the fact that they're getting out of SWIFT. Okay, look, the dollar died. I mean, a lot of people give grief to Jim Rickards. Oh, he said that the dollar's going to die in September, blah, blah, blah. What was he referring to? He was referring to the moment where China launched the SIPs in October. Okay, when China lost the chip, that's the China Interpayment Systems, which is their rival to SWIFT. The game is over. Now, any country being sanctioned do not have to worry about their assets getting frozen by SWIFT via the FedWire. Everything, guys, has to go to the FedWire. Now, the FedWire has been officially circumvented. The game is over. And I don't care how many pronosticators come out here and say things like, oh, there's a bubble in China's stock. I don't care. They're not the ones on the horn with some of the biggest brokerages on the planet. And when they're telling me, hey, last month we did our orders for silver and gold are through the roof, that we literally have to have the miners and the refiners scour Africa for more gold and scour Mexico for more silver, that tells you something. I don't care. See, the point is this. China have they blown bubbles? They've blown tremendous bubbles. But that's how you play the game. You see, people, the most successful people are those that are pragmatic. Those who plan for 5, 10, 15, 20 years in advance. And that's what the Chinese and the Russians have been able to do. They're not like us Westerners. We see a dip in gold price, this, that, and the other. We hyperventilate and want to go jump off a roof. This is a game of pragmatism. Are you going to blow bubbles? Absolutely, because that's how the game is played. That's how you beat the West, because while you inflate your bubble, the West is blowing a bigger bubble, and you're taking this worthless paper instruments that are floated over for you for next to nothing. In other words, we're paying the Chinese to take our U.S. treasuries, and then they use those U.S. treasuries to start building infrastructure on this new world trade reality that is coming to fruition, which is called the New Silk Road. And this is what people need to understand. So gold, based on that little bit of information I've given you guys, is going to go through the roof. If you hold it, it will happen.
Yeah, and regarding price, V, I wanted to briefly, I was going through my papers the other day, and I found something very interesting that I printed off in the autumn of 2014 when I started contributing to Rogue Money as a guest in the program. Came on twice in October of that year. And I was also a guest on the John B. Wells program in December of 2014, where I talked about my questions submitted via my friend Andrei Rayevsky, the Saker in Florida, to Dr. Mikhail Kazin, who is a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences. So this is not just a random Russian pundit or somebody who you may have seen on RT. This is a guy who's dialed in to the Russian Academy of Sciences, which officially advises the Kremlin's Council of Ministers. And he said that, I may have mispronounced that, but that it's called something else officially. But Kazin said that the price of gold, if you look at it from the lower limit of which the gold price is in 1980, which had its local peak after the dollar was decoupled from gold in August 1971, and the upper limit of which is the purchasing power of the dollar in the early 20th century when gold was actual money. He's talking about pre-World War I gold standard. He said, Kazin said at that time, this was late October 2014, Today, this fork in current dollars is seen somewhere at the level of $4,500 to $15,000 per troy ounce. Now, that's a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences, folks. And he knows about double eagle. He knows about the gold stockpiles, and he knows about if you want to talk about deep storage gold, whether that's an asset or not. You can debate that back and forth. But, there's no question Magadan region, Russian Far East, that's one of the epicenters of global gold production.
Yeah,
and they have subsidized their gold industry at a loss through these central bank purchases, paying a premium for the gold that they do produce, because the Russian central bank gets the first claim on what's coming out of those mines to keep them alive at this artificially low price.
Right. It's at this price, it's being gifted at this point. And my thing is this, man. It's like whatever the U.S. comes out and says at the end of, at the other end of this whole entire economic reset, whatever we come out and say, hey, we got deep storage gold, it's got to get audited.
Yeah.
See, this is what I'm saying. This is one thing. We don't hold the cards, and I don't care what anybody says. We do not hold the cards in this regard.
Because as the expression goes in the Toronto Stock Exchange, the CSX pink sheets, a miner is a liar next to a hole in the ground.
Yeah.
You got to audit the reserves. And it's a big problem in Russia for private gold companies too, particularly those owned by Rothschild. If you read John Helmer, you'll know what I'm talking about with Deripaska and some of the other players who, several years ago was a subject of a lawsuit where I think it was Nathaniel Rothschild sued the Telegraph and some of the other British papers for publishing photographs of him with Deripaska on a hunting vacation together in Siberia. This was like 2010 or 29. I'm trying to remember. And of course, the Rothschild lost the suit because the papers had contended that these guys were chummy, and it kind of looked like Deripaska was having a nice vacation with his boss, Mr. Rothschild.
Sure.
The guy who floated him in shares in the 90s. But it's changing. The game is changing. Deripaska is let's just say for most of the vast majority of the Russian oligarchs, just like of course the Ukrainian oligarchs are completely bankrupt. The last few years have not been kind to them because the economy has been shifting, because their entire business model was always dependent on cheap credit from the West. That was what kept them going. They were exporting and paying wages in rubles and exporting all these hard assets, commodities, while getting paid in dollars and euros. And of course, because with the low oil price has forced Russia to change its entire economic model and to toughen up and to produce more of other things, more tractors, trucks, KAMAZ, cars, the shipping of German car making capacity to Russia is continuing in spite of sanctions. People don't know that they're still they're still building the car factories. I didn't say expanding them, the existing ones, but they're building new car factories, I think in Kazan region. Kazan is interesting. That's another going to be a hot spot in Russia, of course, in addition to Crimea and Krasnodar region, which have the best climate in the country. Kazan is interesting because it's on the Volga. It's going to be a major hub of the new Silk Road. And together with the investment of Ramzan Kadyrov, the strongman leader of Chechnya, Kazan is going to become, along with Dubai, a center of Islamic banking. Zakat. I'm sorry, not Zakat. I'm mispronouncing it. Maybe you're more familiar with the V. But a center of Islamic banking for Central Asia and the new Silk Road.
Yeah.
Which is a subject the Chinese have keen interest in because they have a large Muslim population in Xinjiang.
Yeah, the Uyghurs.
Yeah, so this is very interesting, and of course there's already a high speed.
Well, a high speed rail that's coming right out from China through Kazakhstan is going to cut right through the Volga, man. So it makes
up and down the Volga Valley, which is only makes sense because that's Russia's highway for bulk commodities coming out of Volgograd and the Caspian Sea down to the Caspian Sea basin. Exactly.
Nice.
So and I think I forget what the last point I was going to make is. I think I've covered mostly the gamut. I just wanted to bring in what Kazin said. That was in late October 2014, like I said, folks. So it's been almost 2.5 years since he made those calls regarding the gold price. And we're not there, of course, obviously yet. It's not 4,500 to 10,000. But I will say that the notion that the ruble could be strengthened, that it actually could be stabilized, has been vindicated. Though I don't think Kazan's entirely happy with Russian central banking policy. He's been a critic of Nabiullina, along with Sergei Glaziev, another Putin advisor. But I would say that there is tremendous strides being made, mostly behind the scenes. You have an alliance. This is where, by the way, the connection between Russia's integration into the One Belt, One Road and New Silk Road projects and the grand strategy of the Kremlin is going, because you have, V had asked me last time, when I signed off in the program, to talk about the Russian troop presence in Libya. Now, they denied that they have Spetsnaz on the ground there, but the base in Western Egypt is probably being built. I'm sure we'll see some commercially available satellite photographs of it before long, where the Russians are jointly operating with the Egyptian military, helping the Eastern Libya-based government, stabilize the country, drive out ISIS, USIS, and essentially where it connects into Russia's interest in Europe is that they want this, I forgot the Libyan strongman's name, to basically create large, like new cities in the desert where a lot of these refugees can be resettled. When they get deported from Italy and Greece and other countries, they can get sent back basically to Libya as a way station. The oil money will finance. At least and EU will also give them money to build this stuff in the desert. It's an interesting idea. I mean, I don't know if it's going to work, but essentially, this is where all.
Will they also deport Angela Merkel to live among them?
I wish they would deport Merkel to a Libyan, new construction town. I'll be wrapping up shortly. But what I wanted to, and that's where, of course, when you've seen this demo project of a house that they built in Russia recently for, I think, $10,000, like a little 500 square foot house or something. I think CJ talked about that on a recent program.
Yeah, the one 3D
printed.
3D printed,
plastics. Right. Well, what do you need for plastics? You need oil and you need a refinery. You build a refinery in Libya, northern Libya, with Lukoil and Eni, the Italian company, or Total, whoever, all investing in it. And then you got your plastics right there. You can start building all this 3D printed plastic, houses. Well, you got to put some stone on top of them, obviously because it's desert heat, but to keep the cool, let it cool off as well at night. But basically, you've got the materials you need for reconstruction in Libya and reconstruction of Syria.
Yeah.
And let the Chinese come in and start building out the infrastructure, rebuilding it, and basically get these people back to work, including people who were enemies, a few years prior.
Yeah, exactly. With that being said, CJ, we're at the end of the broadcast. I mean, we ran an hour today because we're not having Harley coming on today. Harley will be on tomorrow at 10 a.m., so listen in and tune in for that. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, so every time we have a new broadcast coming out, you will be alerted. So make sure not only you subscribe, but you hit that little notification bell. It's very, very important. I can't emphasize that enough. And also, again, guys, follow us on Twitter. Follow us at the Rogue Money and roguemoney.net online, as well as the Rogue Money Facebook page. Check out our sponsors, myfreedomnow.us, myfreedomnow.us. Get the credit score that you deserve. Kick the bankers in the nuts, as we always say. And with that being said, James, your closing comments, man.
James signed off, V.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
He's like, I'm out of here.
I'm not. Cool. CJ, give me your closing comments, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, make sure you check out. We are posting on Steemit now, our Rogue articles, as well as our YouTube videos. I want to ensure people that is the real Rogue Money Steemit account. There's only one Rogue Money. Had a few people that commented on there just because there's just so many hacks and things going on right now, V, that they're like, how do we know that this is the real Rogue Money? Well, it is. You're hearing it now on air. So that's the real Rogue Money account on Steemit.
Absolutely. And if you're sick of FB, and you want a great alternative, go check out Steemit. Get an account with them. Vote and get your other people, get your friends and family, get on Steemit as well. And heck, that's where you should be. With that being said, CJ, we're over and out. Take it away, my friend.